1999. The core team has been together many years before that. We started even with Oracle Forms 3.2.3, 3.0, and have gained significant knowledge about upgrading, migrating, managing existing Forms applications. We operate on a global basis. We have locations. Our world headquarters is based in Stuttgart, Germany. We have locations in the UK, in the United States. I myself, I live in Troy, Michigan. This is where our United States headquarters is based, but we also have partners in Latin America as well. So to get started, the reason why we are around, what sets us apart from all the other vendors out there with regard to Oracle Forms and reports modernization space is that we provide a tool. The tool is called PITS.con, con for conversion. And the key concept, the key basic principle of the tool is that it will help you significantly to reduce your overall project duration, whatever you are planning to do with your Oracle Forms application. We therefore free up certain project budget because we're getting things much like an upgrade much quicker done compared to anyone else. But more important is the last bullet point on the slide. It is more that because we are using a tool-based approach to get things into a modernized version, we provide you a consistent quality across all your Forms modules and reports modules compared to if you do a manual approach where your quality is based on the skill set and experience of the individual consultant conducting those services. The reason why we can do this in a tool-based approach is because our tool is a repository-based approach. For those of you who are still familiar with Oracle Designer, you can compare it to Designer. What we do is we are able to load all the objects that are relevant for an Oracle Forms applications into a repository and operate and make changes, analysis, quality operations or analysis inside those repository. Therefore, we can also upgrade, migrate, modernize within a fraction of the time because we have automated those operations. Our tool consists of several modules. All the modules are visualized here in this turbine image. We have functionalities dealing with Oracle development, maintenance, but going into analysis, section, engineering, re-engineering capabilities, migration capabilities, source code analytics, source control as well. All those modules can be licensed separately, individually. You don't need to have the full suite. We consider our tool as an extension to the existing Oracle development toolset, and I'm sure you will find one or the other functionality very helpful in your potential ongoing maintenance. If you want to have an in-depth presentation of the toolset itself, we have scheduled another webinar on March 25th. You've seen the link in the invite that you received. If you haven't seen that link yet, please join us on our website in the news and events section, and you can register for this webinar there. Also, while you're there, don't hesitate to fill out the Oracle Modernization Survey. You will be entering a drawing to win an Apple Watch Sport, and you can find this as well on our website. With that said, at this moment, I'd like to pass it on to Mike Ferrante. Mike is the Principal Product Manager of Oracle, responsible for Oracle Forms and Reports, but I'll let Mike to speak for himself here. Mike, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Martin. First, I want to make sure that I thank you, Martin, for this opportunity to share this information with all of these loyal Forms customers. It's amazing that the product's been around so long and we've had such a great following all these years. So thank you for this opportunity. This is definitely this is going to be some great information, hopefully, for everybody, and hopefully we'll add some value. Oops.
Very good.
There we go. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. This is a presentation similar to something I've done recently in a conference in Germany, and I really think it's a perfect representation of some of the customer stories I've heard over the years. This poor sleeping tiger hopefully is not a representation of your application. I'm hoping that as we go forward through this session and we talk about some of the current features and future features, you're leveraging some of those so that your tired old application has jumped up into modern day. So let's go ahead and go forward a little bit and see what we've got going on. So the first thing we want to do is we want to take a look at this safe harbor statement. In the session, I'll be covering some dates, some features, and some other information that, for the most part, is just for informational purposes. It's not anything that we're committing to at this point. It's just everything's in the planning stages and just examples. So we don't want to read too deeply into this. So let's take a look at what we're going to cover. As Martin suggested, we're going to take a look at Oracle Forms as a product of its historical nature, and then where we are today, and then potentially what we're looking at doing as we go forward. And I know that that's probably one of the biggest questions on everybody's minds. What are we doing tomorrow? We made a decision to start sharing some little enhancement tips, because we know we do have a lot of customers still using older versions and trying to question why should we move on to newer versions. So hopefully we'll offer some ideas as to what benefit there is to coming forward on the newer version, and even just some basic tips that could be used in almost any version. Then, like I mentioned, we'll take a look at what plans we have going forward, not necessarily for version 12, but version 12 and beyond. We're going to share with you some contact information, which is subtly different than it had been in the past. We've made some minor changes on OTN websites and various other areas, so we want to make sure we share that. And then, time permitting, we'll have a little bit of a Q&A session. So let's get started. So hopefully by now, most of you are familiar with the current timeline. If anyone has seen this slide before, historically I used to take this slide back into the version 10 time frame in an effort to update this and kind of go forward, which is sort of what I've been preaching. I dropped off version 10 because it's quite old at this point. As you can see, we released version 11, release 1 in about mid-2009, and it lived for about 5 years or so, where it's now been technically de-supported. Release 2 came out in mid to late 2011, and will live through mid-2016. So here's the good stuff. So sometime later this year, we're hoping to release version 12. And it hopefully will live at least 5 years with an optional 3 years of extended support. The real information is here. So we're looking at going beyond version 12. Right now, there's currently a plan to have what we will call just an update, not necessarily a patch set, but somewhat of a freshening up of version 12, and that will give us an opportunity to potentially plug in some new features that might have not made it into the first release of 12, as well as bug fixes and security fixes and so on and so forth. But it will be somewhat of a rapid release cycle. As you can see, there's only about a year or so planned between those two releases. Following that, we're going to do it one more time. At least that's what the plan is at the moment. Again, roughly a year later, we'll have another release, which again will give us an opportunity potentially to add yet again even more features, more bug fixes, more security enhancements, and so on and so forth. Hopefully all in preparation for what will be the next major version beyond that, which at this stage of the game, no one knows what that'll be called. Maybe version 13 or 14 or something. Who knows? So this is a really good update. I'm really excited about this. If we stick to plan, we should have support into the very long future, and I'm excited. I'm hoping you guys are too. Let's keep going. We'll get you some good information here. So this is a snapshot of the current lifetime support policy. As I mentioned, you could see version 10 has been de-supported for some 4 years or so now. Version 11, release 1, ended its premier support mid last year. Extended support is still available for it. With release 2, we've got premier support available till the October timeframe of next year, with extended support into October 2017. I will tell you that we are discussing the possibility of extending premier support a little bit further, at least just a few months or so, to accommodate the pending release of version 12. Okay. Just for informational purposes, down at the bottom there, for anybody using version 6, I encourage you to take a look at that note number that I have listed down there on My Oracle Support. It discusses what its timeline was at the time and what options you had back then. If you are still using version 6, I strongly encourage you to come off of that version and move forward for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is just picking up the new features. Okay. So that leads us right into this. Why in the world should I upgrade? What's the point of doing all that? Well, it's not uncommon that I have questions delivered to me asking me things like, you know, is version 10 supported on Windows 8.1? You know, when is version 11 going to be supported on Windows 2012 Release 2? And what about Oracle Enterprise Linux 7? The only way that you're going to be able to pick up those new certifications is if you're using a current version. So if you're using version 10 or 9 or 6, those are obsolete versions. They are no longer entitled to new certifications. If you plan on using new operating systems, the only way that you could use those in a supported fashion would be to upgrade to the latest version. Of course, some of these are obvious as you come on to new versions. Of course, every new version has new features and enhancements to existing ones. Performance and scalability, I know sometimes this is questioned, but just to give you an example, if you look at the comparison between version 10 and 11, although we haven't done any formal comparison testing between 10 and 11, I could tell you that the internal unofficial testing we've done between the old version 10 OC4J environment and the new WebLogic server environment suggests that we're roughly able to scale about 3 times or more than version 10 did. So just to give you a better example, in version 10, we generally recommended approximately 100 form sessions per JVM. In version 11, we've been able to test up to about between 300 and 500 sessions per JVM. We've had customers actually report back to us suggesting they could scale each managed server up to about 1,000 users before performance starts to degrade. So, you know, I said 3 times as much performance. We've got customers claiming, you know, far more than that. So it's a pretty impressive scalability improvement going from version 10 to 11. Easier and improved integration. Again, depending upon what version you're coming from, each version added some changes or enhancements or new integration points. If you're coming from older versions, in version 11 we added, for example, the ability to make calls in and out using JavaScript on the client side, which is a great way to integrate with other technologies, whether it's ADF or Apex or your own homegrown HTML page. You could actually have a form send data out to the HTML page, and vice versa. The HTML page can send information back into the form, and I'll show you where the value is in that in just a second. Ensuring compatibility with other Oracle products. So for example, same thing, similar to the operating system concept. If you want to use an Oracle 12 database, and the only way you're going to be able to do that in a supported fashion is to use a newer Forms version. And that's just one of many examples we could come up with. With each new release, we do take a close look at security. In cases where security vulnerability patches have been released, like critical patch updates, all of those patches are automatically included in the next release, as well as any other changes along the way. And of course, in addition to not only just fixing so-called bugs, of course, there's the effort that goes into just improving the general security of the product across the board. This is a very important one for Forms users. If you're coming from a very old version, let's say version 3 or 4.5, and you want to now move to version 11, the effort involved in you getting to 11 from 3 or 4 or 5 is going to be a little bit more difficult than if you were already on version 10 moving to 11. So if you stay with us and move incrementally with us version to version, your effort in getting to the latest version becomes relatively simple. Having said that, keep in mind we generally don't release new major versions but once every 3 to 5 years, so there's certainly plenty of time, I would think, between each of the versions to do that, and 5 years is a pretty long time. And then, of course, there's the idea of support. Like I mentioned earlier, several of the old versions have been obsoleted and are no longer entitled to support. So by getting onto the latest version, at least if you have issues, questions, comments, or interested in critical patch updates, you'll be able to continue to get those without any interruption. Okay. So moving very quickly through this, let's take a look at some enhancement tips that are based on some existing features. And again, a lot of these you could use in almost any of the web versions that we have. None of these are highly complex. These are very just simple examples that tend to get overlooked, and this is also a common theme that I come across, is that so many of our forms developers are so into the very complex part of the product, they forget about the very simple ways that you can improve your application. So I wanted to kind of share just some ideas just to get your thinking going. So this is a representation of some of the higher level features that we've released version to version. Generally, over the past 10 years or so, the features we've delivered have mostly been runtime type features and infrastructure type features. The items or bullets highlighted in red here are probably the only bullets that you'll see there that directly have the ability to impact with the UI and the user experience. So I wanted to kind of highlight those here because that's going to be the theme of what I talk about for the next few slides. So again, what we want to talk about doing is, as you upgrade into newer versions, we want to encourage you to take advantage of our ability to integrate with other products and technologies. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but on the left-hand side is a representation of an older Oracle Forms Summit demo. In this particular image, it's been enhanced visually as well as technically a little bit, and we'll explain that in just a second. But what you're seeing here is an ability to take a Forms application and integrate it with an ADF application, which coincidentally also has mapping integrated in it as well. So for example, if your Forms application leverages or exposes address information or location information, maybe having a mapped relationship to that application would help the end user in whatever it is the task is they're doing. So this is kind of a good way to show that. But by the same token, as I mentioned earlier with JavaScript, you could also get information out of that application running on the right-hand side, which in this case potentially could be an ADF application, and you could have that information passed back into the form, or vice versa. You could have the information in the form passed into the ADF application. For a purely client-side type of experience, here's an example of how you could create a JavaScript calendar and tie it into a date field on a form. There's a demo of this available on the OTN Forms product page. This actually uses a combination of jQuery and I think it was an open source solution called JDate or something to that effect. But this is kind of a neat example as well. Another way to leverage integration, of course, is visually. For example, if you have a web page, it could be a portal page, an ADF page, a homegrown HTML page, a JSP, it doesn't matter what it is. Anything that has the ability to host the Forms applet, you could easily embed that form directly into the web page that is hosting it. In this particular older image, what you could see there is that the form includes all of the window dressings, the menu bar, its frame, we'll call it the window frame itself. What I'm going to show you in a second is how you could actually remove that and make the application look a little bit more seamlessly embedded into the page. And of course, there is the concept of leveraging common business logic, which is actually one of Pitt's strengths, commonly locating business logic from the forms so that various technologies can access them. This type of functionality is really great in cases where you have various technologies that host your applications, whether it's Forms or ADF or Apex or your own homegrown stuff. This is a great way to leverage that back-end logic. Also on the form side of the house, integrating with web services, also a great way to get information. You know, there's this thought that the Forms product, you know, it's old and it can't do this kind of stuff, but it absolutely can. And in fact, if you're running a web-based version of Forms version 6, you actually could integrate with web services as far back as version 6. So the ability to integrate with web services has been around, you know, since web services, you know, came into the industry. So that's really kind of cool. A lot of people didn't know that. Okay. So let's talk about some simple enhancements we can make to make the end user's life a little bit happier and so that they don't go home with their eyes all strained feeling. So I imagine that many of you are familiar with this type of a look, right, old terminal session. To be quite honest with you, if I had to look at this session all day long, I would probably have a headache because this is just very difficult to look at. It's definitely not appealing to the eye. This application actually came out of a user guide that we had in Oracle many years ago The application itself was the application we used to manage customer service requests, and you might be able to tell that if you could get your eyes focused well enough to read into the actual details on the page. Jumping forward, 10 years or so, graphical user interfaces were born, and all of a sudden color became commonplace. I will tell you that if I was an end user, I would much rather look at this screen all day than the first one. The ability to have important information highlighted and less important information pushed back into the background is very valuable, especially in cases where rapid data entry is important. It's also very important if you're a call center type of an environment and the end user has to, quickly point out particular pieces of information on the application. So let's see how we could make this a little bit even better. So this is that old Summit demo I was talking about. This is actually how it looked when it was originally created, probably about 15 years ago or so. And of course, remember that 15 or 20 years ago, most monitors or displays were relatively small, right? So 13-inch, 15-inch, and resolution was very poor, 800 by 600 or something. So this application running on those older day modern or monitors probably filled the whole screen. But one thing to think about here is that consider what this application does or does not show you. One, it does not show you a whole bunch of information. I mean, think about it. There's only 4 records displayed on the bottom. Potentially there could be 100 or thousands or whatever. It seems very restricted. Same with the above. There's customer information at the top. Very limited. You don't have a lot of space there to display it because back in the day there wasn't a lot of real estate to do it. If your application comes from an old version that was built in that day and you have just brought it forward version to version simply by regenerating, although that may seem fine, you're actually hindering the end user's ability to get their job done given what you could be delivering to them. With just a little bit of effort, you could take that same application, stretch it out a little bit, add some more information to it, and give the user the information that they need to get their job done faster and more efficiently. Certainly you could pop open a new form, but the problem with that is then you have multiple windows open and you're switching between windows. And again, if you're in an environment where time is money, call centers, emergency operator systems, you don't have time to be switching between windows. So you want to give the end user all of the information they're going to need to complete their task in one place. So what you could see here is, I don't know if you could tell, but the resolution obviously is different form to form because the one on the right is almost the same size visually on this slide, but contains a significantly more amount of larger number of information or data. What we've done here is on the right-hand side, where the image used to be on the first form or the old form, we took advantage of that real estate and presented all of the past order information from this customer. We've moved the image down where it belongs in context with the orders that it represents. And the one thing that you don't see on here, which is up here in the top where it says customer name, we've added the ability to display details about the customer within this same form without launching another window. So what would happen in this particular case is if you click on the little button next to customer name, it would replace that additional orders information with details about the customer, maybe their address and, I don't know, their birthday if it was relevant, or credit card information, whatever. And then again, the end user could stay within one place, get the job done, and move on to what's next. More importantly here is the colors. That was the point of what we were talking about. So notice the ugly color scheme on the left in the old form. Personally, again, as an end user, these are not very comfortable colors to look at all day. So what I did was, in the application, we removed all the hard-coded coloring schemes, and we're taking advantage of the form's color scheme option that allows you to set those color schemes at runtime rather than at design time. So on the right, what you see is a color scheme, which is an applet parameter called Swan. And with a simple change in the applet parameter, we could change the look and feel of the application. Right, so here's just a few of them. We're not going to go through all of them, but just to give you an idea that you could change the look of the application relatively easily. Now, some of the colors here are hard-coded. The white background inside the frames, for example, is hard-coded. The white background on the text fields, I did hard-code. But you don't have to do that. You can take advantage of the colors that the color scheme offers, and I'm going to show you how in just a second. But right now you're probably asking yourself, okay, well, what's the point? So what? I changed the color. That's not going to do anything for me. Well, it could. It just depends on how you're delivering this. One, you may have a corporate requirement to have particular colors. More importantly, and what I find more useful is in cases where you have a test, dev, and production environment, by simply changing the color at runtime, at quick glance, you could determine exactly what environment you're running out of. So if it's a dev environment, maybe you want the purple background. If it's production, maybe you want the white or blue background, or whatever the case is. So it definitely can help a task become a little bit easier. Again, not a huge change here, not anything complex, very simple stuff to make your life just a little bit easier. And of course, make the end user's life a little bit more pleasant. Okay, so let's move forward. So I mentioned that you have the ability to take advantage of the color schemes. This is a little bit of an undocumented feature, primarily leveraged by Oracle eBusiness Suite. However, having said that, there's no reason you can't take advantage of it as well. The way this works, without going into too much detail because of the time, each color scheme obviously has a set of colors assigned to it, complementary colors, which you have the ability to expose in your application. So for example, in the employee block, data block on the right, you could see that the current record is set to this sort of green or lime color background. The way that works is, again, the color scheme that we're currently in, which is teal, has, if you look down at the bottom of the second column from the left, you could see OLAF 3. So what that means is that the background color of the current record attribute is set to OLAF 3, rather than a color like red or white or any other color. So that's kind of a nice way to be able to dynamically adjust your schemes. Now watch what happens. We're going to switch from the teal color scheme to the titanium color scheme, and you can see that each of the objects changes colors along with the color scheme that we're changing. Absolutely no application code was changed here to do this, except for to decide which one of the color scheme colors we want to use. So once the application is set up, you could then change the colors of the application without going back into the source code. All right, so there's purple. BLAF, for anyone that didn't know, is browser look and feel, which is, again, primarily used by Oracle eBusiness, but again, you certainly can use that. And then back to where we started, Swan. So cool, easy ways to make your application look a little fresher, a little bit more modern, a little bit less like the 1990s. So here's kind of a summary of what we did with some of those OLAF colors. So one thing I like to have available to me is the ability to see where I am in the application and not just rely on the cursor. So what we did is in PL SQL, we gave the application the ability to follow the cursor with color. So you could see, for example, in this case, the background color of the customer ID field is sort of a yellowy orange kind of a color, which is where the cursor currently is. If I move down to the sales rep ID, the background color changes. And if I move to sales rep name, it moves again. Out of the box, there's no feature that allows you to do that. There's no current item visual attribute property that doesn't exist. So this was done through PL SQL following the cursor. The other thing we did in this application to highlight where we are and where we left off is the current record visual attribute, which I just mentioned, and you could see that on the right. And then again, just for visual effects, we added a pluggable Java component to the buttons in order to create that fancy little rounded edge on the buttons. But in addition, the buttons themselves are actually leveraging the colors of the color scheme rather than hard coding them. So let's take a look at how we did some of this. So in order to pick up the custom color for the current item, again, we generically wrote some code that follows the cursor around and sets an appropriate visual attribute based on what we want to do. You can see there's a visual attribute called unset, meaning set it back to the default color, and one that is assigned the color itself. In this case, I believe it's OLAF 1 that we used here to set the background color to where the cursor currently is. So not a lot of code here. I mean, what is there, maybe 8 lines of actual functional code there, so not a lot of code. And then what we do is we create the two visual attributes I mentioned. On the left-hand side, you could see we've created the unset attribute, which means we set back to the default. And then on the right, where we actually set the background color, you could actually see we used OLAP 0. We could have used anything. Again, like I mentioned, we could use red or purple or whatever, but I wanted to leverage the color schemes, so I used the Oracle Look and Feel 0, which is that highlighting color, that yellowy orange kind of color. Okay. And this one is, like I said, is a feature that's been there all along, the current record visual attribute property, which is at the block level. Here you could set, again, the visual attributes of the current record. In this case, I just set the background color to set it to that blue color, which is actually not set to a blue color. It's actually set to OLAP Very Light, which you can see here on the left. And again, that light blue color will change depending upon which color scheme you're using. And then on the right, you could see how I set that at the block level. So although not necessarily related to color, I did want to show, since we were talking about the Summit demo, I wanted to show how we took advantage of integrating with some other technologies, not necessarily Oracle's. So again, we took a look at this Summit application that we've enhanced just a little bit, and on it what you'll see is on the address tab, I added a map button, or map it button, and what it will do is, taking advantage of our ability to call it to JavaScript, it's going to call Google Maps and give me a pop-up window with a map that represents the area that is the address on that tab. In this particular case, it's a static Google map where we call the Google API that leverages, that delivers a static map based on that information. It's not adjustable. You can't move it. You can't zoom in. You can't zoom out once it renders it. It's just a static image that it delivers. But that information may be valuable to the end user. Again, this is just one example of a countless number of examples that you could do. I use Google Maps just because it seems just like an interesting and valuable example. So here's how we did it. You can see, again, just a couple lines of code. There's nothing earth-shattering here. In the code itself, you could see how we actually call the Google API, and we pass in the address that we picked up from the form. And then using JavaScript, we do a window.open to display that information. You could have just as easily used something like Web Show Document, but the downside to that is it would launch a completely new browser window with all of the window dressings and full browser window, whereas this way we have the ability to leverage JavaScript's ability to control the window size and the contents that are in that window, and it's more of an appropriate way to deliver it as a single static image. So pretty straightforward, pretty simple to do. So here's a more complex way of doing this. This is like a whole bunch of features plugged into one. For some of you that have been out to Open World and some of the other conferences I've done, we've used this example for quite a while now because it's kind of a cool one. On the left-hand side, what you're looking at in that blue box is actually a form. But notice one thing about it. There's no window dressing on it. Remember earlier I said the Summit demo inside of that web page kind of looked out of place because it had all of the window dressings, the title bar and the menu bar and the status bar and all the other information on it that could have been pushed somewhere else. Here, this is a form running without the window dressing inside of a web page. And what we've done here is take advantage of the Google Mapping dynamic functionality, or the ability to generate a dynamic map. And the way this application works, or demo works, is you enter in an address, you click the Show Address button, and it generates a dynamic map, which could be moved, resized, switched to satellite view, and whatever other manipulation Google allows you to do. You could do the reverse of this. Google offers an ability to send back things like lat-long data. You could send that information back into the form if you wanted. That's certainly possible. It's entirely up to whatever is available through the Google APIs, which at the bottom there's a URL there to get to the information on how we engineered this form. Okay, let's see how we did that. The first thing we did was actually to use the dynamic maps, you have to have an account with Google. It is a free account, and they allow you to access their mapping. I don't remember exactly how many, but I think 20,000 times per day, so quite a lot. Anything beyond that, there's a fee. And the way this works is, if you see the first line up there, you'll see that there's actually a reference to my account, which I've blocked out. But you'll reference your account up at the top there and create two JavaScript functions. Again, all of this information came directly from the Google documentation. This information in the context of forms would either go on a static HTML page that you're using or the forms template file. So for example, base.jpi.htm, for those of you that are familiar with those. And then in your forms application, you just call the function. So the function in that page was called show address. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So if you look at the very last line of code there, or second to last if you don't include the end statement, we call the forms built-in web.javascript eval expression. We call out to the parent page. We call the function in that page called show address, and we pass an address in. And the result is I get an address, or excuse me, a map. And then the last piece of that application was the ability to strip off the window decorations. That's a new feature that was added to 11G Release 2. It's called GUI Mode. There's actually 6 options for that parameter, 0 through 3. Actually, it's 1 through 4, I'm sorry. At any rate, those are all documented in the forms deployment guide. In our case, we chose 3 because it strips off all of the window decoration and allowed us to embed the application directly into the HTML page and seamlessly have it embed into the page. Now in my case, we hard-coded the background of the form blue so that it was visually apparent that it was a form. You could have just as easily made it white to match the background of the HTML page. So kind of cool stuff. And again, the address for Google documentation is there at the bottom. Again, this is all very simple stuff that could really bring your application into more modern day look and feel. So the key here is the application is yours. It's not Oracle's. We just deliver you the tools. It's up to you to take advantage of the features that we deliver. Again, I encourage everybody, if you're upgrading from an older version to a newer version, I'm not necessarily saying go out and spend a whole bunch of engineering time to reinvent the wheel, but at least take a little bit of time to review the deployment guides of each of the new versions you're working with and look at what new features are coming with it. You may find that some of those features can add enormous amounts of value to your application, and in other cases it may be just simple changes that you could make just to gain some modernization look and feel to the application. Cool. Wake the tiger up. So this is the information I'm expecting that most of you are interested in. Let's take a look at where we go from here. So going forward, and again, not necessarily version 12, but version 12 and beyond, have the forms development team looking at every aspect of the product. That hasn't been done in a very long time. Like I said, many of the new features over the past 10 years have been targeted to infrastructure and just general runtime, but they really haven't given you the ability to take control of your application and do some cool new stuff, or maybe take an old task and make the task simpler. So we're going to look at that. But the first thing we need to do in order to accomplish that is we need to look at the builder. The builder hasn't had a whole lot of improvements in a very long time, so I have the development team carefully looking at what we could do to the builder to safely get some features into it that will make your life a little bit easier as you build new applications and maintain your existing ones. I mentioned new applet features for 11G Release 2, the GUI Mode parameter. Going forward, we're looking at lots more. We're not going to deliver you just one. We're going to deliver you as many as we can so that you could actually alter the way your application looks and feels without having to recode it. Security features, as I mentioned, with every new release, we look at security very closely. Beyond just bug fixes, in the next release, as well as the releases to follow, we have a lot of cool ideas for enhancing security features and functionality. In some cases, we're actually going to give control or pass control over to you, the application developers. So just as a for example, and I'll mention it a couple bullets down, but I'll mention it here as well. Single sign-on has always been an interesting example of how security features can be enhanced. Currently, in the current versions of forms, technically all we do is single sign on, right? From a forms application point of view, we can't single sign out. When you exit a forms application that was single sign on authenticated, when you exit the form, the single sign on session is still active. We want to give you the ability to decide what to do when that form exits. Do you want to exit and not single sign out? Do you want to exit and single sign out? Do you want to exit, single sign out, and do something else? We want to give you the ability to take control over your application and the way it's delivered. The JVM controller, it's become very popular, mostly because customers are starting to take advantage of some of the new features we've talked about. On the server side, if you leverage integrated or imported Java, the JVM controller becomes your friend. It allows you to balance the load of having to call the Java processes on the server side. So what we're doing is, in an effort to improve performance, diagnosability, and even scalability on the server side when the JVM controller is used, we're looking at some features and some enhancements to it that will hopefully give you the ability to gain some measurable performance improvements. We've made some significant improvements to the record manager. That's the guy that collects the information from the database when you do things like execute a query before it actually sends it to the end user. We've done some huge changes there. That was originally modeled after what we've done with the in-memory database option for version 12. It's not the same thing, but the idea came from that idea. So lots of cool stuff to save memory on the server side. In version 11, we introduced a feature that allowed you to integrate with the database's advanced queuing feature. That was called an external event. Going forward, we're looking at adding a new option or new set of options that will be called system events, where the forms application will be able to interact or react to events that occur outside of the application itself. Things like client idle time. Has the application just been sitting here doing nothing? Same thing with the database idle time. Has there been no database interactivity for a given amount of time? If so, what do you want to do? Well, let's close the connection so we don't waste the resources on the database, and so on and so forth. Diagnostic features have been improved. We've actually looked at ways in which we could give you the ability to insert or inject information into diagnostics, which is really kind of cool when you're trying to troubleshoot. Often you go into your application, you add messaging and all this various visual cues to see where you are when you're running the application. We're going to give you the ability to do that out to a log so that you don't even have to change the source code of the application. So that's kind of cool. You'll be able to actually send messages out to the logging that says, when new form instance trigger fired, or the cursor is currently in field X, or the user did something, or whatever. That information will be able to go out to a logging system, so that's kind of cool. This next one, client deployment options, has been a topic of discussion in social media and inside of Oracle and on various blogs for a long time. Lots of discussions about the Java plugin. Going forward, we have some really cool ideas of some options to do client-side delivery, one of which will include a browserless option. The client will continue to be Java-based, however, without a browser. So that will be kind of nice as well. So for organizations that are concerned about using the Java plugin, this potentially will be an alternative. Now, of course, the downside of having a browserless option is it becomes a little bit more difficult to do things like integrate with, let's say, an ADF application because, well, there's no browser sitting next to the form that's hosting that application. So there are some downsides to a browserless option, but there are certainly some advantages as well. New installation options, that's certainly on the table as well. We're looking at a form builder only option where you could have all of the builder and its utilities without a runtime option. That would give you a nice lightweight environment where you could manage your code, make changes, work with any of the tools, the XML Converter, and all the variety of tools that go along with the installation. And then when you're ready to run your application, you drop it down onto an application server and run it. So that's on the table as well. Again, lots and lots of new features being considered. We're in the process of looking at some potential cloud options. We've had a lot of customers indicate that they would be interested in taking advantage of a forms environment running out of cloud, so we're investigating that possibility as well. We're not really sure where we're going with that just yet. We're still kind of in the early stages of trying to figure out what the best approach is, but that is certainly something on the table. Okay, so let's take a little closer look at what we've got going on. So I mentioned new builder enhancements. These images are from prototyped examples of what my development team has been working with. For those of you that are the developers that are familiar with the Forms Builder, this is a little image of the layout editor. For those of you that remember, in the layout editor today, the mouse cursor tends to remain the little pointer arrow regardless of where you are in the canvas that you're working with. To me, that becomes very troublesome because when you're trying to resize or move objects, you never know if you actually have your mouse in the right position or not. And 9 times out of 10, you end up moving something when you meant to resize it. So we've looked at finally getting the mouse cursors to work correctly so that if you're resizing, a correct cursor comes up, and same with moving. So that's kind of a feature that probably should have been added long ago. So I'm happy that we're hopefully going to see that in one of these upcoming versions. We've had a lot of complaints about difficulty finding documentation, so in an effort to help make it a little easier for you, the Builder Help will give you access to most of the common documentation. Today you have access to the Builder Help and a link to the OTN network, but not other information like the entire documentation library, which includes installation guides and system requirements and the deployment guides and upgrade guides and all that stuff, so we're going to give you access to that, as well as the Forms user forum. So hopefully this will make your life a little bit easier when it comes to finding the documentation. The XML Converter has been potentially integrated into the Builder so that you don't have to do that on the command line anymore. That's hopefully going to be helpful to those of you that take advantage of the ability to convert to XML. For those of you that didn't know it, this feature of converting to XML from a binary has been there for quite some time. It actually was introduced in version 10. So for those of you using version 10, you already have this functionality, but you have to work it from the command line rather than in the Builder's UI. Also, a topic of discussion, using WebUtil without the open source Jacob library. Although there's no way of us getting out of using the Jacob library, or at least not easily, we do have customers that have asked to have an option to not have to have Jacob if they're not doing OLE functionality or integration with OLE servers like the Microsoft Office tools. So what we're going to do is deliver an upgraded version of the object library so that if you decide to create new forms or you want to upgrade or update your old ones, you could do that in a supported way using this updated object group. Earlier we talked about the new system events. These are some of the ones that we're working on. As I mentioned, client idle time, database idle time, single sign-off, system notification, and media completion. Media completion hopefully hints well enough to suggest to you what other features we might be looking at. We are looking at introducing an audio feature, which would allow you to play audio. This particular system event would allow the form to detect when the end of that audio file is reached. So when the audio is done playing, you now have the ability to execute PL/SQL and do something. Maybe it's exit the form, or maybe replay the audio file, or take some action, whatever that action might be. That's entirely up to however you code it, so that's a cool one. System notification is planned to be a response to a message sent from Enterprise Manager. So we talked about improvements to diagnosability as well as messaging. The plan for that particular feature, like I said, is an administrator could go into the Enterprise Manager console and with the click of a button send a message out to all of the running sessions, the form sessions, and expose a message or execute some functionality to the end users. The best, for example, I always come up with is imagine a case where there's a critical issue on a server and it's you need to shut down the server, and you want to send a message to all end users that says we're going to have to shut down the server, please save your work and exit the application immediately. Now you'll be able to do that right in the context of the form, so that's kind of cool. Okay. We haven't made a whole lot of changes to the widgets in forms. However, we have done this one. On the current tab canvases, version 11 and older, the tab labels can only include text. Going forward, we're looking at adding the addition of icons or images. In this particular example, the images I've shown probably aren't the most exciting in the world, but they do illustrate the ability to plug in an icon or an image along with the text label that's presented. So that'll be a neat little change to freshen up your application a little bit. We talked about security. In the log on and change password dialog boxes, we're going to give you the ability to add just some plain text to these dialog boxes, potentially valuable if you want to add instructions to the end user. For example, maybe you want to say something like the text in these fields are case sensitive, or the best example is in the change password dialog box where you might want to give instructions on what the new password needs to look like, for example, rules. At the moment, the plan is that you will be limited to 255 single byte characters, which means if you're using multi-byte characters like Japanese or Chinese or something, you won't get 255 characters. You'll get whatever that math works out to. I think it's 160 some odd characters. But as you can see by the example I have here, on the right-hand side, there's 210 characters used to make that statement. So even in this case, you still have 40 characters, 45 characters to go before you run out of space. So plenty of space to put a lot of information there. You really shouldn't need to put any more information than that in the field. Okay. Like I said, there's many more features on the way. We're, like I said, working on version 12 at the moment. The planned release is sometime this calendar year. Exactly when is a little bit uncertain at the moment. With that release of the new product and its new features will be lots of changes to the documentation. Obviously, the new features will be documented in there. We've done a huge effort at fixing some of the older issues in the documentation, including the builder help. So I'm really excited about not only the product, but the documentation that's going to come with it. A lot of changes that have been long awaited. So hopefully you guys are excited as I am to get version 12 out the door and get everybody to start using it and having some fun with it. So I wanted to mention contact information, just in case anyone has any questions for me or you're looking for current documentation, you're on an old version, how do I get to the new one, what new stuff can I do with the new one, and so forth. And so on and so forth. For anyone that's not familiar with it, the Oracle Forms product page on OTN is probably your best source of information. It's a little misleading at first. If you go to the URL that I have at the top, it automatically takes you to the Overview tab. Across the top or sort of middle of the page, you'll see some other tabs. There's tabs for documentation and community, and there's a Learn More tab on there. Kind of bounce through those, and you'll see that there's lots and lots of information in there, including links to the actual product documentation, the actual official documentation that includes installation guides, system requirements, and so on and so forth. The next link on there is to the OTN forums, which I monitor very closely. For those of you that use the OTN forums, you probably have seen my name thrown around there countless times. For everybody or anybody that is on those forums, just bear in mind that for everyone that's not an Oracle employee, it is voluntary time, so kind of bear with everybody as everybody tries to share information and help out as best they can. The third one down is similar to the second one. However, the forum in the MyOracle support area obviously is for customers only, people with active access to MyOracle support. The advantage of it obviously is that you don't get interaction from people that are less knowledgeable. For example, there's often maybe students in university or college that are just learning, and you're working in a production environment. You're trying to get information from the experts. You don't necessarily want someone guessing at your solution. So that's sometimes the advantage of having that other forum. To be quite honest with you, I don't monitor the internal forum very actively. That one is monitored primarily by the support team. However, they do contact me when it seems necessary to do that. The most active forum is the OTN forum. And then finally, and somewhat unofficially, There is a Twitter account to contact me. I generally use it primarily to do things like announce this session. We announced this session this morning on Twitter. And most often when I'm at conferences, generally I'll give everyone an update on what's going on. Hey, my session starts in 15 minutes, come see me, that kind of stuff. So if you are generally not a big fan of Twitter and those types of social media, in the case of my account or my ID, I generally do not overwhelm anybody with constant information and bombard you with spam, if you want to call it that. I try to keep it as professional as possible. But I encourage you to get in touch with me if you have any questions, thoughts about new features, whatever it is. Take advantage of the fact that we're kind of a tight community, and we want to keep the health and activity around the product as strong as we can. And with that, Martin, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mike. Let me make back presenter. At this moment, while we're transferring, I want to encourage everyone to ask questions. On the right side of your GoToWebinar control panel, you have the opportunity to post questions, and we will be able to respond in a few minutes here. Let me close out the session just to give you a quick glance about PIT's customer base. We have customers around the world where we help supported Oracle Forms technology. What you most frequently hear, obviously, is to help upgrading and also migrating to other technologies, but also what Mike just announced or mentioned in his session about user interface optimization is a very frequent request. So we're very familiar with this technology and have gained a lot of experience and skill set over the past 15 years. So I also want to point out some reference stories on not only on OTN, but please go on our website, pits.com, and select the country where you're based on, and you will find regional references locally there. But there are plenty of references out there where we have customers tell a story about their experience with working with PITs and going forward. I also want to point out, if you're interested in without looking at our product per se, if you want to just interested in a quick status quo report about your application, we are offering a service that provides you a status quo report, looking at all the details of your application, about certain software metrics, give you an overview about what is currently in your application, how many lines of code do you have, how many program units, and so on. We provide you ability to see what is the ratio of unused tables, unused views, and so on. Very, very valuable information for those of you who simply have developed over many, many years your application and simply want to have a glance of how much business logic, how much value you have created over the past years, especially if you're considering an upgrade or migration. This is very, very powerful information. At this moment, I want to also refer to the upcoming Auditalk conference, KScope 15. Please join us. We will be there, as so many other of our Forms community friends. This will be a great forum where we can share information about Oracle Forms going forward and other discussions. So please join us at KScope this year in Hollywood, Florida on June 21st to 25th. With that said, I'd like to pass a look at the questions that are there. And Mike, if you don't mind, I'll read some of the questions from the top down. There's the first question that was probably regarding the user interface optimization. Can I create a color schema?
Actually, today you cannot. You cannot create your own color scheme today. However, and I was going to mention it, I guess I must have overlooked that, we are working on a way in which you could customize the existing color schemes as we go into some of the future versions. So again, although you can't create one from scratch, in one of the newer versions, we do plan to offer a way in which you could customize the color scheme. So in a way, you will be able to create your own. You're going to override an existing one.
Very good. We have another question, more lengthy question. With the announcement of the support of Java applets in Chrome, for example, architecting ADF and Forms application in a mixed application is at risk. How do you see this in the future? I've heard Forms 12c will give new options to run forms, but it seems all of these options will rely on JVM, thus not helping in case of ADF Forms enterprise apps. Any comments on that?
Well, a few comments. One, Chrome is only one of numerous browsers, obviously, so we can't base our entire business on a single browser. Our Java team is working closely with Google, Microsoft, and Mozilla in general to try to figure out what the best way forward is. I honestly don't have any information on how those discussions are going. I don't know if the Java team potentially is planning on something new from a plugin point of view or what. But again, we're talking about just one browser. Feedback from Microsoft suggested that they have no immediate plans to make any changes to the APIs used to make the plugin work. So from an Internet Explorer point of view, it sounds like we're fine. And similar has been said of Mozilla with Firefox. So if Google decides to shut down Chrome, that's a business decision that they have to make. We have certainly no control over that. From our point of view, like I mentioned, we are looking at other delivery options. In at least one of the cases, there will be an option to deliver without a browser at all, which will eliminate that one restriction that you may currently have. As far as that deployment option integrating with something like ADF, again, at this stage of the game, we're in very early prototype mode, so there's really no way at this point for us to really understand what our ability will be to integrate with other technologies at this point. I'm sure that will be something we will be investigating, but phase one of it will be, let's first deliver without a browser and see where that gets us. So there's a lot of things mostly in the planning stages.
Very good. Another question also about deployments, new things, client deployments options. Does this mean forms could run on a tablet?
We have to make a distinction here. So important point here is that the Forms product has always been about creating applications for your desktop. We haven't really changed that. We're still delivering the product with the expectation that you're delivering applications for a desktop. If you want a mobilized solution, with the exception of a laptop computer, something other than a full desktop operating system, then the best approach is often going to be looking at a mobile solution. Or a player happens to be one, and there's several others that are out there, but again, we're looking at desktop options. If you technically can operate the Java environment on the tablet, that's entirely up to you. And I don't mean technically, but I mean if it does happen to work, that's entirely up to you as to whether or not you use it. However, from a supportability point of view, we will continue to only provide support for full desktop operating systems. At least at this point, we have no plans to change that.
Very good. There's another question. Why is not the reports forum in the developer tools realm at the OTN network?
I'm sorry, say that again, Martin.
Why is not the reports forum in the developer tools realm at the OTN network?
I'm not sure I understand the question. There is a reports forum as far as I know. I'm not sure how actively it's followed. To be quite honest, the reports product really is not, the Forms and Reports product, interestingly enough, are very unrelated products, even though as a product out on the market, they are kind of delivered as being related to each other, but internally they're really not related as close as you might think. So I don't have a whole lot of information about reports, at least not to that level.
Very good. I just scrolled down. There are several questions. I hope you don't mind if I continue asking these questions for another 5 minutes or so, and then we'll with the rest of them we can respond in an email.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, good.
I'm fine. Go ahead.
So the next question there was, what version of WebLogic will be needed for Forms 12c?
The plan at the moment, and I say that carefully, it is just a plan at this moment, is when we release Forms 12, it really will not be the only release. I mean, there's a whole family of products that will be released at the time that Forms is released. So this is not going to be a Forms-only release. The Fusion Middleware product line has a whole fresh set of product versions coming out. We will be just one of many. So the plan at the moment is WebLogic Server will be releasing a brand new version at that time, and it will be that brand new version that will be necessary to run Forms 12. So in other words, you won't be able to use 12.1, which is currently on the streets, with Forms 12. You'll have to use the new version. So we're going to roll out a whole new family, and all of those versions were kind of built in tandem together.
Another question, is there a possibility to participate in a beta process?
That's actually been a common question, and unfortunately I can't answer it just simply because I don't have the information right this minute. The difficulty with doing beta releases is a few things. Part of it is legal, and part of it is logistics. I am discussing it internally with my legal team to see what kind of options we can offer to do a beta. I can tell you that we likely will not do a formal beta test. However, what we may do alternatively is offer an early access program, which would obviously be a little bit more liberal than beta. Basically, you would take the software onto premise and effectively use it however you like, rather than a beta program, which generally delivers you instructions and asks you to test this and test this and test this. So again, we're looking into the opportunities there. We still have plenty of time left if we decide to do that before a release, but at the moment we don't have anything formalized just yet. But as information becomes available, I'll make sure we post it on the Forms product page in OTN.
Very good. Then, is there going to be a Reports 12c?
As a matter of fact, there is. The plan at the moment is that Forms and Reports will release no differently than it ever has before. In fact, the product itself will be called Forms and Reports 12c, or at least that's the plan at the moment. So yes, and to answer your question, there absolutely is a plan to release Reports 12. I don't know if you remember the second set of slides I offered in the roadmap, but on it there were approximately three related releases in version 12. Reports is planned to be included in all three of those, actually. So it isn't just an initial release. The plan is to continue forward with Reports, at least for now.
I now get repetitive questions, so I jump over a few of them. There's one about Oracle Cloud. I think you've responded to that one. The other question is here, will support for PL SQL ever go away in reference to Oracle Forms development?
Yeah, actually, I messaged back the comment to that one, but we'll talk about it here for just a second. PL SQL is the language that makes Forms such a great tool, right? I mean, it's really just so easy to code with. I see no reason for us to ever move away from PL SQL in Forms. You know, one of the things I always like to say is that I get questions asked all the time. Why don't you do things more like ADF? And it's very funny because the answer to that question is, well, if we did things more like ADF, then we would be ADF. You should use ADF. And the same concept here. We use PL SQL because it makes the tool as powerful as it is. It is, in fact, what gives us the ability to be a rapid application development tool. You know, with some of the more lower-level languages, application development slows down because the amount of coding that you have to do is, exponentially increased. So I see no reason for us to move away from PL SQL.
Very good. And there's a question, are there any plans to allow small forms to be run on mobile devices? Maybe I can talk to that as well. We have experience with our customer base. We have done migrations from Forms to ADF mobile or MAF, Mobile Application Framework. Those projects typically take a very short amount of time. We're talking about 2, 3, 4 weeks at most, depending on the use case, obviously. But there are also other solutions out there, vendors like Oraplayer. We have products in that regard who help doing this. So there are a number of ways doing this. You want to add anything, Mike?
No, not really. I mean, we have no plans to change the way the application development cycle goes with forms. In other words, we're not going to intentionally create any mobile design features into the form builder. That just isn't likely to happen because, like you said, there's so many other ways to do it that are probably more appropriate than doing it from directly within forms.
Then there's a question, can we deploy Forms 12c without the Java plugin?
Let me clarify just a little bit. So the Java plugin refers very specifically to the component of Java that quite literally plugs into a browser. And the answer to that question is in 12, we're planning, again, I can't commit to it, but we are planning to offer a browserless option. So you will still need Java on the client, but that plugin component of Java will not be used. So I hope that kind of clarifies. So yes, you'll still use Java. What you won't use is the Java plugin.
Very good. Then there are a couple of functional questions here. Maybe we'll take 2 or 3 more here at this moment because they keep on adding here, and then we'll phase it out here. We'll definitely respond to all of the questions. We will share those to the individuals who ask, but I think it's in light of the time here, we'll do 1 or 2 more in line here from the sequence here. There was a question about, is there a feature currently planned to allow users to upload data from Excel? This is a very common user requirement.
Is there a feature? I'm with you. Well, there's really nothing out of the box per se, but you know, we mentioned WebUtil earlier. You certainly can use WebUtil to engineer something to integrate with Excel. But out of the box, no, I don't anticipate that that we'll be doing anything like that. At least not anytime soon. Definitely not in the next immediate release. No. WebUtil would be the only way to do that from client side, or create your own Java bean. I'm assuming you're talking about client side in this case. From server side, you could, again, we don't offer anything out of the box, but you could do that through Java or C or whatever your language strength is. You certainly could integrate something like that on the server side into Forms.
Okay, very good. So at this moment, I'd like to phase it out here, but we will definitely take care of all the other questions. There are about 15, 20 more questions here. So we'll be responding to those after the webinar. And I'd like to thank you very much for your participation, Mike. And I'm sure if you have any other questions that you don't mind if we share, or your contact details has been shared earlier on the slide, if they contact you directly as well through the channels you presented earlier.
Sure, that's fine, but I want to encourage everybody, if you're having product-specific problems, please take advantage of the support organization. You know, they are set up to help you guys out with the product and guide you to whatever documentation or assistance you might need. It'll help me to prevent me from becoming overwhelmed with emails for questions, for technical support questions.
Understood. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you in the near future on a new webinar or somewhere on the trade shows. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.